We have briefly in the earlier lessons looked at some data types, and we're going to look at this in more detail in this lesson. The ECMAScript standard, there's several different standard data types. So there are booleans, and we know those are either true or false. There's numbers, so those can be written with or without a decimal place. There's strings, so they can be written with a single or double quotes. There's also null, so this is explicitly null, so there's nothing. And by default, when you declare a variable, and if you haven't assigned any value to it, then it comes back as undefined. And there's also symbol and symbol value, so it represents a unique identifier. Symbol, it's new in ECMAScript 2015, and it's a data type whose instances are unique and immutable. And everything else, or almost everything else in JavaScript, is an object type. You can also, with JavaScript, convert between different types, and we have seen this as well, where when we can start out with a boolean, or we can start out with a string, and then when we assign a number to it, the data type becomes a number. So there is flexibility with JavaScript, but you can also force the different data types and the type conversion. So you can convert a number to a string by wrapping it with the string methods, so typing in string and then the rounded brackets, and then using the value or the variable that's a number, and that can turn that into a string. And there's also arrays that can be turned into strings, and there's more on arrays coming in the upcoming lessons. You can also use the .toString methods, so chaining the one value together with another one, and that's going to turn it into a string. So you can convert it into a number, so you can force a string, and as you can see, the 10 has the quotes around it, so this is a number. You can also turn a boolean into a number. And if you try to turn something that is not a number, could never be a number, into a number, you're going to get this NaN, so that stands for not a number. And we can log these out into the console and try these and take a closer look at this. There's also type coercion, which is converted by JavaScript. If we add a number to a number, or if we add a string or something that's not a number to a number, then if it can't be converted into a number, then it's going to automatically turn it into a string. So JavaScript tries to do some of the thinking for us and trying to convert the different values into the appropriate data type. And more often than not, this is a common issue when you have values that you think are numbers and you try to add them together, and it turns out to do 10 plus 5, and it ends up with something like 105 instead of 15. So we find that when we are doing data types, sometimes it's a good idea to force the value and make sure that it is the data type that we are trying to work with. You can also have some fun with the different data types. So one of the JavaScript quirks is that the data types are dynamic. So this means that JavaScript does try to convert it, and we can, of course, convert it with the number or string methods, which allow us to force various data types. And as you can see in these examples, so if we do hello plus world, we end up with a string hello world. If we do 5, which is a string, plus a number string, we're going to end up with 55. 10 minus 5, we're not going to be able to subtract it, but it is going to convert this into a number, and then we're going to end up with 5. So there are a bunch of little strange things that do happen with JavaScript, and you can try these out in the console in order to get more familiar with it. Syntax to use in order to get data types. So if we do type of, that will return the different data types. I'll show you how to do that in the console. And then also output that information into the console. So if we have a 5 and we want to find out what data type it is, we want to output that value and see what data type the 5 is. So opening up our browser, and we can see that we have a value that's a string. So if we have a string and if we add a 5 to it, we end up with the 55 string. If we have a 10 and we subtract a 5 to it, we end up with a 5. So that's one of the weird quirks of JavaScript, is that this one, although they both started out as strings, when you subtract it, then it automatically thinks, okay, well, because we can't subtract one string from another, so then it automatically tries to convert this first one to a number, and this is what happens. So this is what I meant by there are some weird quirks that will happen with JavaScript. So if we take something like hello, and if we subtract world from it, we're going to see that NaN. So that's that not a number, because of course we can't subtract words one from another. So that's a little bit confusing, and JavaScript tries to address it and adjust it, and if it can't, then it simply returns back that NaN. You can also set up a variable. So if we set up a variable, and if we set up a variable of a as 5, type of a, you're going to see that it gets returned back a string. Type of, and if we have a value that is a number, you can see that it gets returned back as a number. And also there's type of, and this one is going to be a Boolean. And it's going to know it's a Boolean because Booleans, again, are either true or false. So we know that those are Booleans. If you do type of null, it gets returned back as an object. Type of undefined, and that just gets returned back as undefined because undefined is its own data type. It is good to become familiar with them. And as we saw with a, so we've got a is currently a string value, and you can convert a to a number, convert it into a number. So we can take the value of string and we can turn it into a number. So when it's blue, it's being returned back as a number. A value of 100, so this is clearly a number, and we can convert it into a string using the toString method. String as well, so there are actually 2 ways to convert it into a string. So those are the 2 examples of how we can convert it. And then if you ever want to find out the type, all you have to do is type in type of. So let's go back to our challenge. And the challenge is to create a string, convert to different data types, and then get the data type of the variable and output that type to the console. Solution, we're going to create a number, give it a string value of 5, then take that string and convert it into a number, output it as a number, and then check the data type of the mynum. So make sure that it has converted. So go ahead and try this out in your editor. You can pause the video and I'll show you the solution. Open up the editor and let's set up mynum, and this can be any number that we want. So we'll set mynum to 100, and then we'll take, and what we'll do first, we'll use console log, and we'll output the type of mynum so that you can see that it actually is being converted. So when we refresh, we see the type is a string, and convert it. So there is the number, and we're taking the variable and we're converting it through. It's being returned back as a number. And if we log out the value of mynum, you can see as well, Chrome is outputting it as a number since it's blue. And wait, hold everything before we conclude. I have another challenge for you. So this is a bonus challenge. Did you get a chance to try some of it in your console where you're adding maybe 2 strings together, maybe 2 numbers together, and maybe a string and a number, and see what happens? So try that out as well and output the value of 5 to 10, and then fix a plus b to equal 15. And remember, converting those 2 numbers in order to add them together. So the solution for this one, setting up a as 5, setting up b as 10, and then what we want to do is add those together in the console, but we want to have a value of 15. Instead, right now we're getting 510. So let's fix that. And we can convert these to numbers by wrapping it with the number method, and again wrapping it with the rounded brackets and having the value passed inside. So that will force a and b to be numeric, and in fact allowing us to add them together and return back 15. So try that one out as well.